Jackson Hinkle, wise beyond his years, a geopolitical expert, an expert on many different theatres, a widely travelled young man, is a star guest on the mother of all talk shows every time he appears. He has his own show, Legitimate Targets, which is a must-watch if anyone is interested in international affairs. Jackson Hinkle, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. I don't quite know where to start, so let me start in your country, if I may, Jackson. The United States appears to most of us to be sliding into widespread civil conflict, maybe even describable as civil war, at the same time as threatening the peace of the world in 3 different continents. What does it look like to you?
I think if anyone is following the events closely in America, and if you're in America especially, which I'm not, as similar reason as you can't be in the UK for the reasons of our critique of these imperialist regimes. But if you are in the United States, you know that that is exactly where we are headed. And I thank you for having me on the program to be able to discuss this from the American perspective, because whether it's the Trump administration, the Biden administration, or a future administration, all we are seeing is a totalitarian control, censorship, and in some cases, imprisonment, deportation, in some cases, even the murdering of legal observers if they do so much as call out the crimes that are being committed by the U.S. state. Now, I don't really believe a lot of the intra-party conflicts and contradictions that the media likes to play up. You have governors, Democratic governors, saying that Trump is a war criminal. When they get back in power, they're going to do the same thing. You and I both know that. Our audiences know that. The American people, what they need to do is unite across all political divisions, because these divisions are really fictional. They are contrived, and they need to unite in a way that says, we are not going to vote for anyone that commits genocide. We're not going to vote for anyone who kidnaps sovereign democratically elected presidents in the middle of the night. We're not going to vote for anyone who, I guess, is giving logistical support for assassination attempts on the Russian president. It just cannot continue.
No, but it is going to continue until somebody stops it. The bully only stops when they are felled. And that's a point I made just before the break. And I'm keen to test where that might be possibly happening. But before that, let's describe the state of affairs in the United States. I described the ICE as essentially a personal Gestapo. At least the Gestapo was the state police. It seems to me ICE is the Trump police, and they are threatening and even gunning down innocent civilians. In this case, a young woman, a mother of 3 in Minneapolis, and they're pointing their guns at people's heads entirely illegally all over the United States. We've all seen the pictures and the video, and that is bound to bring them into conflict with, however hypocritical, the governors and mayors and police chiefs who have the lawful authority and thought that they had the monopoly of that authority. And suddenly a private army has appeared in their midst, terrorizing the citizens that elect them.
Yeah, I mean, all of this started because a random young YouTuber or ex-user went to Minneapolis and made these videos about alleged Somali fraud of public funds being defrauded in these Somali education centers. And maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. I don't really know. I didn't look into great detail, but it got heavily boosted on Elon Musk's app on X, best friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, the guy who's going to bring a bunch of AI technology to Israel. He just announced an agreement with Netanyahu. and it got boosted heavily. Trump sends in these ICE officials. ICE, we were told, was supposed to be utilized by the federal government to get rid of violent criminals and illegal criminals in the United States. And I think most Americans probably could get behind that. You know, if you have violent people that are not here legally, then maybe they shouldn't be here. But now, as you mentioned, they're killing single moms, mom of three, legal observer. We've all seen the video. This woman was not trying to run someone over. They released the POV footage from the ICE agent who killed her. And he was like carrying a phone, or he had a camera or something, and he dropped it. And people are trying to pass it off as evidence that he was hit by a car. He was not getting hit. She was literally saying in the video, "I'm backing up now," or I'm gonna park over here or something. And then they just shot her straight in the face the same day Trump is threatening airstrikes on Iran, which we all know is going to result in the mass murder of Iranian citizens. If in fact any Iranian citizens that are protesting, many of whom, most of the violent ones, are backed by Mossad in the US, if they are killed, then Trump is going to do airstrikes. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. And, well, you know, I think you're 100% correct about the statement you gave on bullies, and that bullies need to be stood up to, because we've seen how it goes for countries when they don't stand up to the U.S. And I don't think North Korea would have tolerated three U.S., USS aircraft cargo vessels off the coast of their country doing airstrikes on their sovereign citizens for months on end, like Venezuela did. And countries should take a lesson from that whole situation.
Now let's turn to Venezuela then. It seems to me, although I had some doubts in the week, that the regime has not fallen in Venezuela. Whether there's weak spines in some parts of their leadership is still open to question, but the massed ranks of the revolutionary forces are taking the matter into their own hands, notwithstanding. People are being arrested for treason, for having collaborated in the illegal kidnap and rendering of the legitimate president of the republic. Roadblocks are established. There's a hunt for Americans. The U.S. administration has just demanded all American citizens leave Venezuela immediately because of clear and present danger to them. It seems that if Trump does want to enjoy the kind of Zoom call emperorship of Venezuela, he's going to have to get up. He's going to have to invade Venezuela. And he's not going to be able to do that, is he?
Well, if U.S. forces or troops or paramilitary personnel were sent to Venezuela, I don't think it would end well at all. In fact, I don't think I can even say how it would really end on YouTube, because it'd be too graphic. Whether it's the standing army of the Venezuelan military, whether it's the People's Militia, which is 1 million to 2 million strong, whether it is the guerrilla groups that have been and still are living in the jungle and have been fighting for 60 years now, I don't think any of these people are going to be happy with U.S. military personnel, U.S. contractors protecting oil companies, and I think it will end very, very poorly. But you mentioned the Maduro regime minus Maduro, because that's what it is. All the key figures are still in place. Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, is still there. Diosdado Cabello, the minister of interior, is still there. Pedrino Lopez, the defense minister, is still there. Everyone is still there except for Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And the fact of the matter is, Trump is making a big show of the 30 to 50 million barrels of oil that Venezuela has donated to the United States after Maduro was arrested. Donated is an interesting word. I mean, it's basically seized as a result of, potential threats against the country once more. But 30 to 50 million is really nothing. It's a great way for the Venezuelan government to get the U.S. off their backs, to get Trump off their backs. Trump gets to take a victory. And that's enough oil to power the U.S. for less than 2 days. So it's actually minuscule It's about a month's worth of Venezuelan oil at the current production rates, which everyone knows are extremely low due to the sanctions and the naval blockade. So I think Delcy Rodriguez is acting as a brilliant leader, walking a very fine tightrope right now and trying to avoid future attacks while also maintaining the security and stability of the country. And we'll see where it goes. But right now, I can't say I'm disappointed in the Venezuelan leadership, minus Maduro.
The threat to Cuba this afternoon by Trump was a declaration of war. As you know, a blockade is a declaration of war. All of the U.S.'s actions against Cuba since the victory of the revolution in 1959, almost in absolute real time from 59, almost from the victory until now, have been extraterritorial. But this seemed to cross a line. He said, no oil, no money, nothing will be permitted to enter Cuba, which is a declaration of a total blockade, which is a declaration of war. What's likely to happen there?
Well, what happens is either Cuba falls or other countries like Russia and China decide to do something about it. Everyone knows that the Soviet Union shared a beautiful relationship with Cuba and provided them a lot of support throughout the years. But after the collapse, who did Cuba turn to? Venezuela. Well, Venezuela has a blockade, and they're even seizing these Russian-flagged oil tankers, civilian tankers now that are leaving Venezuela. If someone cares about Cuba and the future of Cuba, I think that what needs to be done is a military escort of energy ships, civilian energy ships, to Cuba's ports to make sure that the people have the energy they need, that they don't starve, and that the country doesn't collapse. And Marco Rubio, get to govern another country. I guess it's insane to me that this is what the U.S. government is focused on right now. When our infrastructure is all dilapidated, our country's falling apart, people getting shot in the street. Anyone who thinks that, by the way, we're going into Venezuela or Cuba, which Cuba does have offshore energy deposits, but anyone who thinks we're going there to get cheap oil, cheap gas, and your standard of living is going to improve couldn't be more wrong. Did your standard of living improve after Iraq or Syria or Libya? The answer is obviously no, because we don't actually dramatically increase oil production when we go into these countries. The oil companies artificially decrease the level of oil. They use that as leverage against the governments that they are trying to control. And who really wins is Goldman Sachs, Citibank, Bank of America, Chase Manhattan, BlackRock, all these major hedge funds and multinational finance capital firms. And the American people get left out dry, as of course also the people of these countries we target.
Cuba wasn't the only country that Trump effectively declared war against this afternoon. Seems like every afternoon, every day, there is a new crisis launched. He said today that he is preparing missile strikes against Iran. We both know that Iran is locked and loaded. What are the likely repercussions of any resumption of American bombardment of Iran?
Well, Jerusalem Post just mentioned as well that Trump wants to assist the protesters, and he's talking about either cyber attacks in Iran or Starlink assistance, even though the Iranian government has already knocked out 80% of Starlink usage since the start of the protests, as well as potential military strikes. I think that Netanyahu is preparing for that. I think that everyone kind of understands that this is what was going to happen since the end of the 12-day war, because the goal has been, as U.S. generals have mentioned in the past, Wesley Clark, talking about the countries that the U.S. was going to target. Somalia was one of the countries they wanted to target because of its access to the Red Sea. Iraq was one of the countries. There's Yemen was one of the countries. Sudan was one of the countries. Iran is the crown jewel of these countries that just so happen to not have Rothschild banks and don't follow every single whim of the World Bank, the IMF, and the U.S. State Department. So I do think it's very likely. And what do I think is going to happen? Well, it's I guess Israel and the U.S. are caught between a rock and a hard place because they just divided the Iranian people with all these Mossad protests. Now they're going to unite them by launching airstrikes against them. Well, one last thing I'll say about this is I wasn't sure if it was you or Pepe who mentioned this when you had Pepe on, but someone was talking about the potential of Iranian preemptive strikes against Israel. And the fact of the matter is, Iran already is in a state of war. Mossad was funding these violent terrorist activities all across the country for weeks on end. Of course, there were some genuine protesters concerned about the economic issues, but the violence was all Mossad. So it wouldn't really be too out of the question if you're the leader of a government and you're having internal proxy conflicts against a foreign actor that attacked you preemptively several months ago, to make a decision like that. And I think just maybe that actually might quell how big the storm might become if, in fact, they decided to otherwise wait for Israel to launch the first attack.
Meanwhile, there is some good news, Jackson. Tonight, NATO seems effectively defunct. Trump said NATO is nothing without the US, and that's undoubtedly true. And the rump of NATO is currently sailing its warships and having its men pack their winter gear to go and garrison a place called Greenland, which Donald Trump has asked the Pentagon to prepare an invasion plan of. So, I mean, I'm so much older than you, but if you had told me, and I think even if I had told you, that NATO would end with the European rump fighting the American fundament of NATO, it would be a fitting end to what has been a thoroughly malignant organization throughout its entirety.
Yeah, you're not going to hear me cry about an internal conflict amongst NATO powers. I'm not going to be the one that sticks my neck out to say we must stop this. I will say, however, though, that a U.S. Annexation of Greenland, I mean, it's clearly this Trump administration and future, complete deep state controlled pro-war administrations after Trump. What are they going to use it for? They're going to use it to try and act as a direct power challenge to Russia. In that part of the world where Russia has currently, a really total grab on whatever they want to do in terms of shipping, in terms of whatever they want to do in military training up there. And this is, I think, part of a grand plan to challenge Russia. And, I'm very happy to see that people are waking up to the fact that Trump doesn't actually want a peace deal with Russia. He never really did. And this is just one step, further on the road of escalation against Russia, I think.
Well, my last question relates to Trump. As I watched him be humiliated by the oil executives in the White House just yesterday or the day before, and I saw him rise, Joe Biden-like, and wander to the window and start ruminating about this opera house or ballroom, or whatever it is he's turning the East Wing into. I, for the first time, questioned his sanity. I'm wondering if we're dealing with a demented emperor here, a kind of Caligula.
What sane leader would order the CIA to provide logistical support for Ukraine to send 91 drones to the home of Vladimir Putin in Novgorod? I don't know. That doesn't sound like a sane leader to me. Doesn't sound like a sane leader who in the first weeks of his administration, he sent Rick Grenell down to Venezuela to do negotiations with President Maduro. He gave an OFAC exemption license to Chevron to do business with the Venezuelans. And then just, less than a year later, we're out here kidnapping the president and his wife and injuring his wife. She got a big bruise and Band-Aid on her forehead. She's got bruises all across her body and a Delta Force operation. And, God only knows what types of drugs those Delta Force guys were on when they went in there. They have a bad habit of doing that when they're on these sorts of raids, according to Seth Harp in his book Fort Bragg. But this is definitely not a sane president. This is definitely not a coherent president, and I can only say that I am very, very worried to see where things go in the future. I guess the good thing is that it serves as a constant and further eroding of the legitimacy of that very seat, the seat in the Oval Office of the President of the United States. And people all across the world, but more importantly in America, are realizing that it doesn't matter who you vote into office. Both parties and some of these, third parties, they're all controlled opposition, controlled figures, and they all want the same thing. They want war and destruction and more profits for Wall Street and the shareholders of these massive hedge funds.
He has also this week established a new doctrine. We could call it the Don Roe doctrine, which in short is that landing a boat on a piece of territory 500 years ago doesn't mean you own the land. Sitting Bull and Geronimo and their ancestors might have something to say about that, as might the Palestinians.
And an interesting fact about the Monroe Doctrine is the Monroe Doctrine actually said that Europe must stay out of the Americas, and the U.S. will as well. I mean, on paper, that's what it was supposed to be about. And then Roosevelt came in with the Roosevelt Corollary, which basically legitimized and put on paper the notion that the U.S. would get to do whatever it wanted in the Americas, and would get to resource, strip all these countries, and the Europeans still had to stay out. So this is really, I don't even know what to call this. It's just, it's the law of the jungle. And other countries need to realize that no one cares about international law. No one follows it. No one believes it. They are in the same jungle as Donald Trump. And if they don't start acting like it, they may become his prey very soon.